What's up, guys? I'm BTC. The PTR just got an 8 GB massive balance patch full of buffs and nerfs. Let's check it out. Imagine this conversation for a second. Players. Hey Blizzard, Double Barrier is too strong. Could you please do something about that? To which Blizzard responds, okay, well in that case, we're going to nerf the characters that are a strong counter to Double Barrier. How's that work for you? Yeah. Sound like it doesn't make a lot of sense? Well, guess what? Because we're going into the patch notes. After the introduction of the 222 roll queue system, there was a fairly big balance patch, and we were told by Blizzard that another very large balance patch would be coming, and it is finally here. There is a ton of changes in this, so let's just get started. The first character is D.Va. She got some buffs to the defense matrix. So in the 3-3, the GOATS comp, D.Va was incredibly powerful, and the defense matrix was just way too strong in that scenario. But now that it's 222, they needed to make some changes. So with D.Va, she got a buff. The regeneration rate was increased from 12.5% to 16% per second, so that means it will recharge faster. And on top of that, the delay before regeneration begins was lowered from 1 second down to 0.75 seconds. So it will now start regenerating quicker than it was before, and it will regenerate faster, meaning that you're going to have a lot more usage of the defense matrix with D.Va now. The next character is Orisa. She got yet another nerf to her barrier. The cooldown was increased from 9 seconds to 10 seconds. So the strength of the barrier is going to remain the same as it always has been. It's just now 1 second longer in the cooldown. For Roadhog, he got a buff. Instead of having 5 attack, he now has 6 again. He used to have 6 before, and he's once again at 6. So this means that his overall damage per second is going to go up just because you don't have to reload quite as often. The next character is Sigma, and he got some nerfs. So the first one is that the Kinetic Grasp will no longer block Chain Hook and Whip Shot. So these are physical, they're not quite projectiles, but they're physical attacks, and normally they would go right through something like a defense matrix, but for whatever reason, the original version of Kinetic Grasp would block the Chain Hook and also the Whip Shot. So particularly against Roadhog, this is a very, very big nerf for Sigma. And also the Gravitic Flux, which is his ultimate, the high gravity effect duration was reduced from 1.2 down to 0.9. So a slight nerf on that. And then for his experimental barrier, the regeneration rate was also nerfed. So it went from 175 down to 150, and it now has a 1 second cooldown after recalling the barrier, and the initial 0.2 second cast time has been removed. So now you can't just keep pulling it back and throwing it out, pulling it back and throwing it out. There is going to be that cooldown, so there's going to be that kind of slight delay when Sigma and his team are going to be vulnerable when you're moving and replacing the barrier. So overall, these are some fairly substantial nerfs to Sigma combined with what he got in the previous patch as well. I don't like the way that they're handling the barrier. Having that cooldown is just not good. I can see some of the other stuff working, but the making the delay on the barrier just it doesn't seem to really be a good idea. I'm okay with the reduction on the shield charge and all that sort of stuff, but you know, being able to quickly move it and replace it is important because, remember, this barrier is significantly weaker than that of Reinhardt and Orisa. Like, the overall uptime of this barrier is going to be less, so you need to have more of that flexibility, and by putting this big delay, and even that 1 second is a big delay, putting that big delay on it really weakens this barrier, even more so than it was before. Next up is Winston. He got the opposite. His barrier has now been buffed, so the duration went from 6 seconds up to 9 seconds. The cooldown remains the same, so that's going to stay up there for quite a while. And also the health was increased from 600 to 700. So Winston got a pretty substantial buff to his barrier, the exact opposite of what just happened with Sigma. Moving on to the DPS, there are some pretty bad nerfs in this patch. I'll talk about that in just a second. We'll start with Doomfist. So the first nerf that he got is to his Rocket Punch. The max charge time was increased from 1 second up to 1.4, meaning obviously you're going to be more vulnerable when you're trying to get that max charge Rocket Punch on an enemy. This also affects when you're trying to escape, because one of the most common initiation and combo things is Slam followed by Uppercut, and then when you're using your Rocket Punch to escape, you now cannot use the full power Rocket Punch in order to escape. So you're going to have to use something like a half charge in order to get away, which means that you're going to travel less distance and it's going to be overall slower and all that sort of stuff. The other nerf that Doomfist got was to his passive. So it now only gives 30 extra temporary shield down from 35. So they nerfed 2 of these things. I don't agree with these changes at all. Doomfist was not being used that much prior to the double barrier. The only reason why he was seeing an increase in play was because he was particularly good against double barrier. And now that they're nerfing double barrier, they're nerfing Orisa, nerfing Sigma, they're getting rid of that. So once they get rid of that double barrier, then Doomfist is once again going to go back to being less played than he was before. So they're nerfing a character that was only good because of the current meta, while simultaneously nerfing the current meta. Like, it doesn't make any sense. More on this when we get to Symmetra. So the next character, though, is going to be Sombra, and they changed the way that the Translocator works. This is kind of weird, right? So here's the deal. They changed it so the cooldown is now from 4 seconds up to 6 seconds, which is a nerf. But they also made it so that the cooldown begins immediately when you throw out the beacon instead of after you use the ability. So now you can use it and then immediately throw another one. But then it gets put on a 6 second. So it's kind of a nerf. I don't know if I want to say it's a buff, but it's a change to how the ability works, right? So, like, if you throw it out and then it immediately gets destroyed, well, then you're going to be in a problem, right? Like, that's a bad situation. But there's also going to be other cases where suddenly you're getting attacked, right? And you recall, and then you throw it again, and you can recall again. I accidentally went invis, but you get the idea. So you can throw it, and then all that sort of stuff. So I don't know, it's kind of a change. I'm not really sure if this is necessarily better or worse. I think it depends on the situation. Next up is Symmetra, and again, this is another one of those cases where they're nerfing a character that is only being played because of double barrier. So the first thing is that her ultimate, the Photon Barrier, the duration was reduced from 15 seconds down to 12 seconds, and the max health was reduced from 5,000 down to 4,000. Now, 4,000 is still a huge amount of health, and chances are you're probably not going to get through it, so that's, you know, not really that big of a deal. The duration loss, though, the 3 seconds, that is pretty significant, and as I've said before, I don't think that a DPS character should have a defensive ult, but that's, you know, story for another time. Now, another thing was that the Sentry Turret damage was nerfed from 50 down to 40. So this is per second. And then also, the Photon Projector, the players impacted by the primary fire beam should now hear a louder impact sound. That isn't anything, you know, major. It's just more so that it's less annoying when you're being attacked, that sort of deal. But again, these are 2 nerfs to a character that is only being played because of double barrier. And when double barrier goes away, Symmetra will probably go away with it. So, like Doomfist, these changes don't make any sense. And then the last character in the DPS that was changed is Tracer, and she just got a flat buff. The damage fall off now starts at 13 meters, up from 10 meters. Although, that feels weird. Did they change the animation on that? It sounds like they changed the sound on it. I don't know, that just feels different. than what it was before. But in any case, even if they didn't change that, it is a flat buff to the character. It just means that you can now attack from slightly further away. I think they did change that animation. There's a lot more shaking to the screen, or at least it feels like there's a lot more shaking. So now it just means that you can do more damage at slightly longer range. Moving on to the healers, Baptiste is first up. He got a nerf for the Immortality Field. The health from it was reduced from 250 down to 200, but remember, this is a 20-second long cooldown, so I don't really know if that nerf to the health is needed. I realize that this is powerful and that it can, in some cases, be almost as good as like a Lucio Sound Barrier, but it's a 20-second cooldown, and they can destroy it, so I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't know. I don't really think that's a good idea. Maybe they could have shrunk the area for it or something instead, but that just seems like a bad balance change. Next up, unfortunately, Brigitte didn't get any changes. Her kit is not very good right now. It kind of conflicts with itself. There's not a lot of synergy among her own abilities, but in any case, no changes for her. Lucio did get some changes. So first up, the speed boost was, the effect was changed from 20%, it was buffed up to 25%, and then amp it up was changed from 50% to 60%, but as a result, his wall ride speed was reduced from 40 down to 30. So what they did was they kind of reverted some of the changes that they had before, where Lucio lost some of the group benefit and gained more of his individual benefit, but now they've kind of switched that around and they've made it so that he's better for the teammates and it's slightly worse for himself. Next up is Mercy. She got an interesting change. So normally whenever you use your beams, they will go through enemy barriers, whether it's a healing or a damage beam. You can just lock onto your teammate and you can still heal them when they're on the other side of an enemy barrier. But with Valkyrie, what would happen is the extra beams that would kind of branch off would get blocked by enemy barriers. But now with this change, they won't. So now when you use your ultimate and it's beaming and linking up to other characters, it will not get blocked by enemy barriers, which is good. Now, I know what people are thinking, oh, is this going to be good against Double Barrier? Well, I mean, it's kind of good and it's kind of bad at the same time. Because, yes, it works against the enemy who's running Double Barrier, but it also doesn't really hurt them, right? Like, you can still run your Double Barrier into their Double Barrier. Like, it doesn't really make it, you know, it's not like it nerfs that particular meta or anything like that. It's just, you know, it's just an extra effect, I guess. So whether or not they're running Double Barrier, I mean, it's definitely a buff for Mercy, yes, but, you know, this doesn't necessarily hurt Double Barrier. The last character that's getting a change is Moira. So what they're doing is they're making it so that she gets less health from attacking, and it's being dropped down from 30 down to 20 per second. So her total healing, her total damage is all going to be the same. You're just going to get a little bit less health when you're attacking. So this is overall a nerf to her survivability. This wasn't really needed because the thing that Moira does really well, better than all of the other supports, is her survivability. And, like, she doesn't have any utility besides that, right? The only thing she provides is raw healing, a little bit of damage, and she can survive really well. And it just doesn't make any sense. This is actually weird because the previous change that they made for Moira was making it so that you could use your Fade even after you got stunned or slept or all that sort of stuff. So they made her more survivable, they took that away, and now they're making her less survivable. But again, the only reason why Moira is even being used is again because of the Double Barrier. And I have a feeling, just like with Doomfist and just like with Symmetra, when Double Barrier finally goes away, you're going to see Moira go away along with it, because that's the only thing that she was ever really viable in. So there you go, guys. Those are all the balance changes for this patch. Some of it is good, like Dva, Winston, and Roadhog. Although, really, I wish they would have done more with Roadhog, rather than just giving him one extra attack. They didn't do anything to Brigitte, which doesn't make any sense, because the character just has problems right now. But some of the other stuff, like, again, Doomfist and Symmetra and Moira, those characters are only being used because Double Barrier is meta. And as soon as Double Barrier goes away, those characters will probably go away along with it and be replaced by other stuff. Like, again, none of these, it's like some of those changes just don't make any sense whatsoever. I'm not really sure how or why they're coming to these conclusions. Maybe there's just a big dartboard and they throw the darts at the wall and they're like, oh, today we're gonna nerf this character and we're gonna buff this. Like, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense on some of this stuff. So, but anyways, there you go. Supposedly there might be some more stuff in the patch. If there is, I'll be sure to let you guys know. So what do you guys think about these changes? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.